Okay, here we go. Hello, everybody. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar as part of the Global Week for Justice. We're just letting people in the room as we arrive, so we'll just wait another 1 or 2 minutes and then we will kick off. Thank you for your patience. Just for your information, we're recording today's webinar. So if for some reason you don't want to have your face on the recording, then that's fine. You can keep off your video, but also you can turn on your video because today we really intend to have an interactive session together. So it's now 33, so without further ado, I'm going to kick off today's session. My name is Kristen Hope, and I'm Global Research, Advocacy and Participation Advisor for Terre des Hommes Foundation. And I'm so pleased to be here with a fantastic panel. And we're very grateful and thankful to the Pathfinders for Justice for hosting us as part of their Global Week for Justice. And we're here to talk about justice for children in the pandemic and to really focus down on what sorts of actions we can take as a community that's trying to uphold justice for children in the context of achieving justice for all and in this particular context of the pandemic. Before I start, I'd like to hand over to Maaike de Langen, who is the program lead on Justice for All with the Pathfinders, to give us a bit of an overview about the Pathfinders. Maaike?
Thank you, and good day, everyone. It's great to see so many people joining. As part of the Global Week for Justice, today we have a series of sessions diving into some of the more specific topics, and of course, justice for children has been from the start one of the main issues that we cover. So just a few words on Pathfinders. We are a group of countries and organizations working to achieve SDG 16, which includes the promise to provide equal access to justice for all by 2030, an ambitious goal that was set in 2015. One of the first challenges actually that the Pathfinders took on was to look more in detail on this issue of justice for all, and a task force was set up which ran in 2018 and 2019 and produced the Justice for All report to really think through what needs to be done if we want to make progress towards that goal. And out of that report, the Justice for All report, came this notion of people-centered justice. And as you all know, within the SDGs, there's also this notion of leave no one behind. And so a number of work streams have been set up to look at how we can work to leave no one behind. And if you look at, if you look at people-centered justice, obviously there's different kinds of people, and children are an important, significant part of the world population, and also, of course, the future. So that's why this came up quite early on in the process, and this group on working on justice for children has made a big contribution. Now, I won't go into all the details about the organization and everything we did, but we're now in the process of really taking the next 4 years of this SDG framework to turn all these ideas into concrete action. And of course, when we had started that, the pandemic hit, as we all know. And so we have reoriented our work, and I'm very glad to have been working with these amazing people in this Justice for Children group to also think through really what the pandemic means for justice for children and how we can act to mitigate the worst effects. And build on the call to action that was actually published before that. So one of the things we've done this week, and I'll say a few words on the Global Week for Justice, just to give you a sense of the broader context, I would invite you to look at our website to have a sense of all the events that are taking place and have taken place. But it's really to build on this movement and bring together actors, both government actors, organizations, academics who want to push this agenda forward. So we had the Justice Leaders Dialogue on Tuesday, where 20 ministers of justice came together to discuss justice leadership in the pandemic, and really discuss how people-centered justice can help justice actors play a role in the response and recovery from the pandemic. This was hosted by Justice Canada, and the whole week, by the way, I should say, has been organized together with Justice Canada, the OECD, and the Open Government Partnership. We also had a session yesterday launching the OGP Coalition on Justice. And as I mentioned, today are a series of more thematic or focused technical sessions, of which this is one. The other ones are on investing in justice, on justice data, and on the role that the private sector and business leaders can play on promoting justice for all. And tomorrow we will close the week with a panel on justice for women, which is also going to be very good. But I will leave it at that because I know there's so much to discuss in this session. I hope you will enjoy this session. I will be listening closely and hearing from these experts. But do have a look at our website and see, read a little bit about all the other events that have been going on. And thank you for this opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you so much, Micah, for being with us today and for all of the support of the Pathfinders. And thanks also to all of our partners who are here. This panel has been co-organized by a number of partners. So ourselves at Terre des Hommes, and my colleague Marta is also here on the call, Marta Ril. We also have IBCR, the International Bureau of Children's Rights, and Guillaume Landry is here. We also have Inspiring Children's Futures at the University of Strathclyde, represented by Professor Jennifer Davidson, who is here. And we also have Angela Viril from Baker McKenzie, who is also here. And we have a special guest with us today, who's Philippe Jaffé, who I will introduce because he will provide us. Philippe is a professor at the Center for Children's Rights Studies at the University of Geneva, and he's also a member on the Committee of the Rights of the Child. And Philippe is going to set the scene about this moment and this opportunity that we have to uphold justice for children in the pandemic. So Philippe, I would like to hand over to you to really help us locate this particular moment in time. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Kristen, and hello to everyone, dear colleagues, wherever you are, any time zone you're in. I'm speaking to you from the heart of the Swiss Alps in Switzerland, where it's very nice weather. And I feel very privileged, and thank you for inviting me because we're in semi-lockdown now. So webinars help us travel and listen into interesting webinars and gain wisdom from all the interesting perspectives that my colleagues will provide. With reference to children in the justice system, I would like to address two facets of the coin. First, I will talk about big systemic issues that affect society and juvenile justice. And second, perhaps more experiential, and if you will, more psychological elements that pertain to children. Recently, I've had really interesting workshops with some colleagues on drawing up a science policy brief on building resilience to COVID-19 and future pandemics. And this very interdisciplinary team, which drew on academia, of course, but also being based in Geneva on all the leading organizations and institutions in health, economy, trade, and other sectors. We had these workshops where the first item that you and I also notice is that
about how people make decisions about what works and how we can continue a virtuous circle and cycle of generating knowledge in order to inform better practice, in order to learn, and in order to continue to improve the quality of the work. So thank you so much. And Jennifer's also just popped in the link to a video as well about the COVID-4 log. So I would also like to share an action-oriented example of how we can uphold justice for children in the pandemic. And this example is particularly related to one of the topics that Philip mentioned and one of the topics that is also in the challenge paper. And it's the specific situation of children who are deprived of liberty. So when we say children who are deprived of liberty, we mean children who may be in prison institutions for children, or so-called rehabilitation institutions, but they're closed institutions. They may be there pending trial, they may be there serving a sentence, but we also mean a range of other institutions, which can be closed orphanages or alternative care institutions. They can also be administrative detention facilities for where children and families are kept due to their migration status. So there's a whole range of institutions when we speak about children deprived of liberty. And this particular initiative, I'm going to pop in the chat box a link to this. We've been developing over the past few months with our pro bono volunteers from the law firm Baker McKenzie, who's a lead partner in this. And we thank you very much to Angela and her whole team, who have been so mobilized and so dedicated around this particular topic with us. We've developed a policy and practice brief, which I will share here, the link there, so everyone can consult that. We've developed a policy practice brief about accelerating the release of children who are deprived of liberty in the context of COVID. So, and in addition to that, we've developed a series of 3 specific operational guidance for frontline practitioners. So the policy and practice brief captures the initial phases of how justice systems reacted to the COVID-19 pandemic, but with a specific focus on children who are in conflict with the law and who are deprived of liberty. The policy and practice brief synthesizes research, media reports, international guidance, and operational perspectives in order to provide a snapshot of the policies that have been adopted and undertaken to respond to the needs of children deprived of liberty in the initial months of the pandemic. And the policy and practice brief also sets forth a range of policy recommendations, which are illustrated by practical examples of rapid response from actors who have been, such as Taldezam and such as other partners in the initiative, who have been responding in an emergency context to the needs of children who are deprived of liberty, and trying to adapt our responses quickly in the context of lockdown and various confinement measures implemented in the wake of the spread of the pandemic through the beginning of this year, and obviously continuing to adapt those as the shape of the pandemic continues to change and evolve. So that's a policy and practice brief, which you can find again on the link that I shared. In addition to that overview, we have developed a series of operational guidelines, and the operational guidelines are intended to provide concrete guidance to frontline practitioners who are working with and who have a role to uphold the rights of children who are deprived of liberty. So these 3 sets of operational guidelines are organized according to 3 different groups of practitioners. The first set of operational guidelines focuses on the social workforce, so including social workers, but including also potentially psychologists, and what are the roles that they can be playing when it comes to accelerating the release of children who are deprived of liberty. The second set of operational guidelines focus on security forces, including police, and thinking about what are their roles to play in their mandate with respect to accelerating the release of children who are deprived of liberty. And the third set of operational guidelines focuses on the roles of legal professionals, including lawyers, including different paralegals with respect to upholding the rights of children and accelerating the release of children who are deprived of liberty. So now we have an opportunity to go into breakout rooms in order to discuss this a little bit more. I'll hand over to Jennifer to speak to us a little bit about how we're going to do that while I do the technical things behind the scenes.
If anyone has ever seen a juggling act, Kristen is doing a remarkable job of that at the moment, between technical and moderating and giving us some insights. So this is really the heart of the session today, is to be going into these 3 sessions, these workouts, breakout sessions. And the purpose here is really, it's to give us an opportunity to go in much more depth within a context of very specific context. So social workforce, security forces, and legal professionals. We're really excited to have a chance to be able to talk through these things with you. We've got some tremendous speakers who are so knowledgeable about these issues, who will be facilitating each of those. So in room 1 will be the social workforce, and that's Marta Gill from Taldezam. In room 2 will be the focus on security forces, and that will be Guillaume Landry from the International Bureau of Children's Rights. And in room 3 for legal professionals will be Angela Bichil and from the Baker McKenzie. And as that session goes on, it will be a roughly 20-minute session. And we're going to be capturing your input on Jamboards and then coming back to hear very briefly key messages from those sessions you weren't able to be a part of. And then think together at the end about the next steps and where we go from here. So I'm told by Kristen that it's really an easy job to get into a breakout session if you haven't done this before. So you don't even need to buckle your seatbelts. You just need to click on a button that will soon be appearing on your screen to send us to each of the different rooms. So Kristen, back to you to tell us when that button is going to be appearing and what you'd like us to do with that.
Thank you so much, Jen. Thank you for introducing the rooms and for introducing our fantastic facilitators in those rooms. I've just popped in the chat box the full bio of Guillaume and Angela, and also here is the bio of Marta as well. So for those of you, they're the full bios of your presenters, and we're going to send you off into your breakout rooms. And again, I can't emphasize enough that this is really an opportunity for us to hear from you, for us to hear what is working in your context, what are the challenges, and for us to share knowledge as part of this peer network, this community of practice, where we all have a role to play in upholding and fulfilling and realizing justice for children in the pandemic. So we really encourage you to be active participants in these breakout sessions, to learn from each other, and we really look forward to hearing from you when we come back to the plenary afterwards. Thank you so much. The button should appear now. So welcome back, everyone who's coming back from the breakout rooms, that wonderful moment as we travel through space-time on the internet without leaving our chairs. Thank you all for your very active and dynamic participation. I had the privilege to be able to jump in and out of your discussions and could hear some very interesting conversations happening. Thank you all for your dynamic participation, and thank you to our facilitators for their excellent facilitation. So for now, we would like to hear back from the different groups. So I would like to hand over to Marta, who was with group 1. Marta, would you like to share your screen with the Jamboard, or would you like me to share my screen? It's up to you.
Yes, thank you, Kristen. I think Hugh was adding the last point. I mean, maybe you have the most updated version, if you don't mind. Otherwise,
yeah, for sure, no problem.
Because maybe he didn't.
Well, if you go ahead, I'll add it while you're talking. Yeah, I'm just.
Okay, great. So I have a co-facilitator, which is even better. Thanks a lot, Hugh, for the discussion and also for helping out here. So so now everyone can see the screen. Yeah, the Jamboard. Yeah. Great. Okay, so just a couple of minutes. There were some, interesting ideas that we were discussing. I will start, if you don't mind, with the gaps. We were discussing a little bit around the essential work of the social workforce that sometimes is a little bit also forgotten in the justice apparatus. When we talk about children in contact with justice systems, we know that the social workforce play an essential role, and how difficult it has been for them to take a place during this pandemic, while they were the ones, really accompanying the children and their families. So we were discussing a little bit about the operational guidance that what we have done is to capture how case management for children in contact with the law can be done in a context of emergency like COVID-19. And then we were also discussing a little bit, okay, when we think about the social workforce in upholding justice for children during the pandemic, what are the gaps that we've seen, or gaps that we still need to address or to consider? And it was, I'm sure it's not new for all of you, but I think it's very important to consider that so many of the services and many of the mechanisms to access some services, some contact has been through technology. And it has been a great debate on technology, but we know that innovation should not be only about digitalization of technology, because then we will be leaving a lot of children left, a lot will be left behind So we were just thinking that one of the gaps is like how to take innovation and explore innovation from a different point that is not only about technology, because we know that many children do not have the resources or their families. And that was a little bit around the discussion that we know that many of the children that are facing issues with justice or are in contact with justice are coming from quite difficult backgrounds with socioeconomic difficulties. So how to think of innovation for justice for children in a way that is not always technology. So that was one of the points, and a very interesting point to explore more is in a context where we have disruption of services, reintegration pathways of children are absolutely broken. We know that communities play an amazing role, and also we talk about family members, but we also talk about community leaders and people that play a significant role in the community. So we do need to explore a little bit more. We do need to grasp a little bit of evidence on how to establish processes accompanied by the social workforce, but that the community members can really foster themselves. I was sharing some examples that we have in the Gaza Strip and in Jordan as well, on how the social workforce they were organizing community members to be close to the children that were released because of the COVID. And there was an interesting point also by Hughes, like saying maybe we need to create some systems in which community will be deciding what needs to be kept open, positive places, recreational places, ways of also facilitating some spaces for the children. So yeah, this was a little bit the gaps that we were discussing, and very quickly on the resources and tools. Hugh, I gave you the word so you can explain this technical note on social service workforce, because I think it's really important. So, and it's good to have a colleague as well here.
Okay, yeah, just to mention that I mean, obviously there's a whole range of guidance, as you'll all know, that's come out during COVID, and there's been a technical note on child protection during COVID, and the Alliance for Child Protection and Humanitarian Action was a big partner for that. But we also collaborated on this particular technical note on social service workforce safety and well-being during COVID-19. And that's me speaking on behalf of the Global Social Service Workforce Alliance, of which I'm director. So the importance of this technical note is that without safety and support and protection of their well-being, then the social service workforce will not feel confident to continue working in the community and continuing to do home visits and to reach out to vulnerable children and families. So this has been quite a neglected area, particularly early on, where the essential role of the social service workforce was not recognized and they were not provided with PPE. But even when they were provided with PPE, they were not getting psychosocial support, supervision, and guidance. And as you know, Marta mentioned, it was many social workers have felt that police know how to do their job. They carry on doing their job, enforcing the law. Lawyers follow the law. Doctors do their job. Obviously, everybody is adapting and innovating, but often left really in the middle, just not knowing how to do their job in these new changed times, have been the social service workforce, who have to somehow innovate a totally new way of working in the community when most other services have been shut down. So that's just why I mentioned that there.
Thank you so much to Marta and to Hugh for your feedback and sharing with us that very dynamic discussion, and really highlighting and reinforcing the importance of the role of the social workforce as key players in upholding justice for children. And we very much appreciate you sharing that resource, Hugh, and we can definitely, we are collating a number of resources as well on our Justice with Children website, so we can definitely also see how we share and promote the dissemination of those critical resources. Thank you so much. I'm going to jump over to the second Jamboard for room 2. Guillaume, over to you.
All right, thank you. So we had a great group of experience professional ladies who brought examples from Serbia, Lebanon, and Mexico in particular. So interesting discussion. I have about 10 takeaways that I would highlight. The first one is you see that interesting resource produced by Defense for Children International that was seen as a good practical tool for advocacy and policy work. So that's a great reference. Then in terms of commonalities between those three countries was the challenge in applying diversion. So the three countries, alternative to detention and diversion was not applicable because currently in the operational and legal system, the security forces do not have a role to play. This is an option that is only reserved to prosecutors and judges. So it does bring a lot of limitations to this, although the context is now an opportunity to document lessons learned, but that's a critical challenge. Also the problem of changes in government, many priorities. So the ability to advocate for changes in that model is limited and there's little appetite. So difficult to draw particular attention on this. Saying at the moment, a lack of information about what happens to those children who are getting released. So a need to further document are there cases of recidivism? What is the experience in terms of reintegration? So it will be important to document that. And then there's a shortage of knowledge at the moment on this. And other commonalities is that the police is not mandated, is not formally attributed a role in reintegration. So when children leave a period of deprivation of liberty, police is not seen as an actor of importance in that reintegration strategy. And at the same time, there is a little movement to get, especially with municipal police, closer to community policing techniques, but there's a lot to be done in order to reflect the importance of the role of the security forces as part of that system. There's a witnessing of an increase in the number of arrests, the use of handcuffs. So the context is bringing more children to be in contact and in conflict with the law. So that's a direct impact of the pandemic and something to be taken into account. One interesting observation as well is that access to location where children are deprived of liberty is much more difficult at the moment. So the pandemic is serving as a justification to restrict access from civil society organization, partners who used to be responsible for education, psychosocial assistance in those venues, at the moment cannot anymore return or visit those places. So it does bring a lot of challenges to take care, to consider the well-being of children currently detained, but also to get access to information and data about the impact of the pandemic on those children. So something to be also taken into account. Two more points, bear with me, sorry. The next one is how detention continues to be used, and the notion of last resort is really not a reality in those countries. So how it is continue to be sort of a systematic use of detention, especially on pretrial detention when it comes to more serious offenses. So really to break it down into an ability and procedures so that detention is not systematically used, that there's a lot to be done in that regard. So in spite of the pandemic, this continues to be systematically used. And to the next point is online training. So interesting that it's been used to sort of, in light of the fact that personnel on the front line, the police, do not necessarily have all the tools and the competences to deal with the current situation. There's been efforts to give access to online training, but the backlash is people are overwhelmed with a plethora of online training opportunities. And so the appetite to use this online material has been really low, and the impact is to be questioned. So interesting as well to challenge ourselves with the sort of easy solution of using constantly online training at the moment. The impact does not seem to be always there. Last point is the argument as diversion. In many countries that have a system whereby it's only prosecutor and judges who can use it, how can we still have a conversation with the police and give them some responsibilities and accountabilities on how they provide information to the prosecutor and judges so that the prosecutor and judges can divert the case? So in other words, the police is very much the entry point of diversion. It's not just about having the decision-making power to divert, but when that decision is given to other, it remains that the police, in the quality of their reporting to the prosecutor and judges, will really accelerate the capacity to apply diversion techniques. So how are we sort of furthering that understanding with the security forces remain a challenge. I hope I did a good job for my group. There we go.
Thank you so much, Guillaume. Such rich and detailed discussions, and really fantastic to see so many ideas and such a wealth of experience as well in that group, similarly to group one. So without further ado, I will pass over to Angela. Angela, we would love to hear about the discussions in your group as well. And just actually to make the link, I was hearing in your group when I jumped in about some of these concerns about too many resources, which is similar to what Guillaume was just saying about the training. So Angela, we look forward to hearing from you. The floor is yours.
I think that's right. I think we have sort of despite the myriad of ideas, because there's too many to say in a few minutes, we have sort of two categories of ideas that our group really collected. And one was about, they all sort of fall under how we have a strange challenge with silence in different ways. So the two categories are things that we need for advocates and things that we need for systems. For advocates, we have so many tools, so many things online, so many written documents that you can have so much that you can have nothing. So you can end up with feeling like there's nothing out there because there's too many to choose from, and a unique kind of silence. And there were some reflections. We had a huge global spread of discussions and a multidisciplinary spread, which becomes important, because this idea that we need tools that are short and sharp and usable to develop skill sets. Not just information, not just guidance, not just discussion, but actual practical, super practical skill sets. And when you have too many things out there discussing too many things at 50,000 feet, you don't have anything practical you can pick up and walk into a court system with. There was a great comments about how we also need to make those practical tools multidisciplinary. This whole idea that we're not listening enough to science to help advocates be more child-friendly and child-focused and child development able. As well as judges and everyone else. The interesting point here too, which is somewhat self-critical, so I'm happy to raise it, that came out of our group, is this idea that we also have to find a way to motivate legal advocates to need or want to be child-friendly advocates, that there's not a lot of motivation to do it. It takes more time. There's not really any detriment if you don't do it well. There's too many kids and too many cases and too much going on in the court system. So thinking about new ways to say to actors in the legal system at all different levels, this is something you should prioritize, and here's some motivation to do it. On the system side, we really found that there was a great comment made about how there are some sectors that during COVID-19 have just reached out and are looking for all these tools. And even though there's too many, they're happy that there's many. And then there's others that are just silent. Again, not engaging, not reaching out. And what are we doing to reach out to juvenile justice systems, or even parts of the juvenile justice systems that are just quiet about it? And that we need more resources for those government actors who said, okay, it's my job to make our system now approachable for children under these new circumstances. And maybe we don't want too many more resources, but we want honed resources and show those government leaders what can be done well. And then there are some systems that in COVID-19 have used COVID-19 as an excuse to make barriers to advocates for children and raising children's voices. And this is something that we're not sure that we need tools or resources for, but we do need some strategic, perhaps even aggressive tactics to take on, because this isn't ending anytime soon. And I hope I represented my great team well.
Thank you so much, Angela, for that work. And also on behalf of Taldism, I'd like to thank once more Baker McKenzie and all of the pro bono teams for all of their support with these documents and with the Justice with Children website, which we recently launched. And also, I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. Just one last thing to say. That Angela and our colleague in Taldism, Cedric, just published fresh off the press, a blog post on the Global Dashboard, which also is an initiative which is supported by some of those who are involved in the Pathfinders, really capturing some of these perspectives about the importance of upholding children's rights in the context of the pandemic. So thank you again, Angela, and your colleagues at Baker for all of your support. And thanks again to everyone who participated in these discussions. It has been incredibly rich. I also am pleasantly surprised because actually when we were preparing for this session, we didn't know to what extent we would have experts in the room, given that the context of the Global Week for Justice was also, addressing a certain audience, and we didn't know if we could expect to have experts in child justice systems. But what we see today is that there's a huge wealth of expertise that has been gathered around this virtual space with an immense amount of insight and resources. And I'm so glad that we've been able to convene here today to support each other in this process. So I will hand over now to Jennifer, who will provide some concluding remarks for us today. Thank you.
Thanks, Kristen, and thanks everyone. That was fantastic. Actually, I just think while the facilitators were feeding back for the groups that I wasn't a part of, I was thinking, how did you cover that much information in such a short time in the group? So fantastically rich conversations you've just had. I have the honor at the moment to just finish off with a few thoughts to leave us with and some next steps to hopefully sort of continue with the galvanizing of our momentum that is clearly already well underway. I think one reflection to share with you is just the importance that these three workforces have in terms of the power that they hold to affect children's rights or to breach children's rights. And these three workforces are just incredibly powerful in the lives of children, and particularly those children who are the most marginalized and facing the greatest amount of adversity. And so I think it's just such an important thing that we're focusing on the functions and the work of these workforces. I also really want to value the fact that we're talking in one session today about these three workforces, because what we know from the evidence on the ground is that it's the working of those workforces together across and between what sometimes are highly rigid silos of disciplines, that working across and between with the vision of a child's life and the outcomes of that child's life is really the magic that sometimes we don't see, and as a result, children really are not supported in the way that they need. So today, I think, was an example of how we understood some of where the gaps might exist, as well as the importance of these workforces. I think the other thing to reflect on is that we've talked about two different things today in relation to advocacy and evidence on one hand, and then skills and knowledge on another. And so today was very much about the skills and knowledge in the operational guidance, which is brilliant, that we need to be strengthening. And I think those really speak to respond to the now of how do we respond right now to the realities for children and how they're experiencing the realities of COVID. And that's really critical. I think I want to hold on to that advocacy and evidence piece as well, which is, I think, speaks to something of Philippe, what you brought in at the very beginning, which is how are we now planning? How do we plan now for later so that we're not going back to how things were before, but what work and building blocks are we putting into place now to help us to make sure that how we're responding to children in the justice system is different post-COVID than it was before COVID, so that this is an opportunity for real change. I think in order to find the evidence that we need for that, there's a lot of work that's going on in lots of different spheres. The smartphone app that I had the honor of sharing with you today, led in partnership with 17 global partners, some of whom are represented here today, is just one tiny way, but I hope an important way to get the evidence informing some of what we're trying to understand about children that we can use for advocacy going forward. one further next step to share with you, which is a new piece of information rather than wrapping up, is to say that in our partnership with the Pathfinders for Peace, Just and Inclusive Societies, we are developing a companion briefing report to their series on justice in a pandemic, and this will be justice for children in a pandemic. So I'd like to really thank you for your input today. Clearly the resources, the knowledge, and the reflections you've made today are so relevant to that briefing, and we will be drawing on those on your input today to inform that briefing. If you would like to be involved in any way with the development of that briefing with us, the team that are taking forward Justice for Children, we would really welcome hearing from you, and please feel free to just go back to that Eventbrite email address and send me a quick email at Inspiring Children's Futures to say you'd like to be involved, and we'd be delighted to work with you as we develop this companion report in the next couple of months. And so there's much to do, and there are many children that we are really wanting to support, and we are keen that we continue together. And so thank you for your time. I'd like to just briefly thank Kristen as a phenomenal coordinator who seems to multitask with about 6 different brains all in one go. I'm not quite sure how you're doing it, Kristen, but thank you, because that was expertly done. To our speakers, Philippe, who's had to go, Micah, who's also had to go, to Marta, Angela, and Guillaume, thank you so much. But most of all, really, I'd like to just thank you for attending and for giving us so much of your rich knowledge from Mauritania through to Italy to all around the world. So thank you so much on behalf of all of the organizers, to all of you. And we look forward to staying in touch with you. Thank you again. Have a lovely day.
It was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. We will send you the recording as well. So thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.